to talk about my dad. To talk about my dad as a friend, I got to talk about the Lynn family. My dad's first job as a professor when he got his doctorate out of Texas Tech was to go to Kansas State. And the man that gave him his first job was Bob Lynn. And Bob's wife, Naomi, became my dad's fast friend. They worked together on journal articles, and I've never seen somebody who could make my dad giggle. And she did. They would laugh so hard they'd lose their breath. There was something about the two of them when they got going. Bob and Naomi here were here last week. Bob himself is fighting bladder cancer, although he got
good news.
He got an all clear, right?
This week.
Just this week. But they were here for his brief stay in the hospital and then his time in hospice, and they were here they were here for him. But so as a representative from the big Lynn clan is Nancy, and I think you got quite a bit.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me without the mic, or do I need the mic? Just let me know.
It's fine.
You're good? Okay, because I'm not that coordinated. Juggling the mic is just one more thing. But if I get too quiet, let me know, and I'll sing out again. Hi, I'm Nancy Lynn Francis, and I'm here representing 3 generations of the Lynn family. We first met the Vadens in 1969 in Manhattan, Kansas, as Eric said, when he joined the K-State faculty. And just to put that in perspective, my earliest memory of Eric, he was in a high chair, just saying. So our families, again, became extremely close. We spent Christmases, Christmas Eves, Thanksgivings, 4th of Julys. I think we invented holidays. We were always together. So we were together for many years in Manhattan. Then both families moved from Manhattan at the same time. My parents moved to Atlanta. Dick and Eileen moved to Hattiesburg. Then after Eileen's death, Dick was struggling. He came and he lived with my parents in Atlanta, and then he ended up settling there. And eventually he bought a condo in the same building as my parents. And then when my sister Joanne and her 2 kids, her 2 daughters, needed a place to live, they moved into his condo, and then he moved in to live with my parents. So they were all together in the same building. When my parents moved to Illinois, then Dick ended up moving to Indiana, so again, was not too far away and was a frequent visitor in Illinois. Finally, then when he moved to California, they were separated by distance at that point, but they remained close to the end. Sorry. My parents were here last week, as he said, and it meant everything to them to be here. And my sister Mary Lou was out here too, part of that time. But my dad's health is just too fragile, so that's why they're not here. And I'm representing it. I'm going to do better. In a second, I promise. Anyway, I asked my family members if they could send me some memories to share, and they did. So you're going to be hearing from a few of them here. I'm going to start with my older sister, Mary Lou. She lives in Boston. As I mentioned, she was out here about a week ago. And here's Mary Lou. One of my favorite memories of Dick was at my wedding. He was using a cane, but I managed to persuade him to get up and do a dance with me, a rumba, as I recall. I'm so glad I got to go and be with him for part of that last week. I loved him and will miss him. All my love to his family and friends, you're in my prayers. I'm doing this, by the way, in order of age, in case you're wondering. So that was my older sister, Mary Lou. Next is Nancy. That's me. I'm number 2. I was a scrawny, non-athletic kid, but I loved swimming and boating. Dick and Eileen used to invite us out on their boat all the time, and Dick very, very patiently taught me to water ski, which took, I'd like to say it took weeks, but it might have taken months, frankly. I was just that big a klutz. So, but he was always so patient and kind, and I will never forget the sense of accomplishment and joy that gave me to learn that. And so I was always so grateful for him for that. Now I go to Judy. Judy is my younger sister, not my youngest. I'm working my way down. Here's Judy. I can't remember a time when Dick wasn't in my life. I always described him as an uncle when asked to explain our relationship. We didn't have extended family in Manhattan, so the Vadens were our family. We celebrated many holidays and birthday together. I loved going out in their boat. It seemed like we were out on Tuttle Creek Lake almost every weekend during the summer. One of my favorite memories was Dick's lima bean supreme. It was a casserole with lima beans and ground beef, and it was his specialty. He knew how much I loved it, and I remember being invited over quite often when he made it. I think he really appreciated how much I loved it, because not everyone was a fan. He was such a special soul. I feel so blessed to have had him in my life. All right, and now I'm moving to Joanne, who is my youngest sister. Putting into words my feelings and memories of Mr. Vaden is one of the most difficult things I've ever done. I can't pick a favorite memory. There are too many. I can't think of what I appreciated the most. There is so much. I have very few memories of my life before he, Mrs. Vaden, Val, and Eric became part of my family. My first clear memory was when I was 4 or 5 years old. I went on a business trip, I think to Dallas, with my mom. Mr. Vaden and some other man, I can't remember who. I remember riding in the back seat of a state car, playing and laughing with him, loving his duck voice. I was hooked. Throughout the years, he and his family were part of everything, capital everything here. Christmas, Thanksgiving, 4th of July, and birthdays. Our summers were filled with planned and impromptu trips to the lake to spend time on the boat. Day to day, we had so many dinners together, either at our house or theirs. I mean, who can forget Taco Tuesdays, or whatever day of the week my dad came home with like 100 tacos for $5. But it was fun, and it makes me happy to think about. And Mr. Vaden was always there for me. I will never forget him coming to pick me up while tornado sirens were going off when I was home alone. In retrospect, probably not the smartest thing to do, but I felt safe with him. In 1985, I had my oldest daughter, Jessica. By then, the Vadens had moved to Mississippi, so it was not until she was around 15 months old before Mr. Vaden met her during a trip to Disneyland in California disguised as an ASPA conference. I was so excited for two of my favorite people to finally meet. Of course, Mr. Vaden was thrilled to meet Jessica. Jessica, not so much. I couldn't believe it. What was wrong with her? Up to that point, I thought she was perfect, but this was going to be a problem. Well, thankfully, by the end of the week, and a trip to the ER, because it turns out she was sick when we arrived, which is what I blame for her temporary lapse in judgment. She too was hooked. When Mr. Vaden moved to Atlanta, boy, oh boy, did we need each other. He had lost Mrs. Vaden, I was getting divorced, and had, by that time, 2 little girls. He bought a condo in the same building as my parents, and very generously let my girls and I live there while I finished school. He was there for Hillary's first Christmas. One of my favorite pictures is him holding her while she is wearing her Santa Claus suit. He absolutely loved Jessica and Hillary, and the feeling was mutual. He loved taking the girls out for frozen yogurt, and would tell all about the unlimited toppings they would get and eat, which sounded disgusting, but he loved it. During one of those outings, when Jessica was about 3, a little boy there struck up a conversation with her. The little boy asked her if Mr. Vaden was her dad. She said, no. Then he asked her if he was her grandfather. She said, no. He then asked, who was he? She thought for a second and said, he's part of my parents. She got extra toppings back down. Eventually, the girls began referring to them as their grandpal. He was so patient, caring, loving, and indulging to them, and I cannot adequately express how much he meant to them. As I am writing this, I am remembering 100 little things, so many memories I cherish. The mayonnaise sandwiches, the jokes, many of which still make me giggle, teaching Hillary how to drink out of a straw, and being there for her first steps. When Jessica got married, I gave a toast directed to her husband Bob, at the rehearsal dinner. I spoke with the 3 most important men in her life and the big shoes he had to fill. Those men were my dad, her dad, and Mr. Vaden. I'm so grateful he was able to see the wonderful young women they have become, and I'm happy they were a source of love and pride for him. Val and Eric, I hope you know how much I appreciate you sharing your dad with me and my girls. I love both of you. Your family, never ever forget that. Okay, on to Jessica. Jessica is my oldest niece, Joanne's oldest daughter, okay? I hope you're tracking with all this, okay? All right. I'm not sure it's possible to put into words how much Dick, Mr. Vaden, has meant to me. But then, of course, we've been trying to find the right word since I was little. To my sisters and I, Mr. Vaden is not so much a name as it is a term of endearment. When she and I were little, we struggled to come up with just the right term for his relationship to us. A friend of the family just wouldn't cut it. We eventually came up with Grandpal. Like him, the name was playful and loving and a little silly. So many of my earliest memories feature Mr. Vaden. I remember him taking us for ice cream and down to the building garage so we could play with our motorized Barbie Corvette. I remember him taking us to get our hair cut and threatening to tell the stylist to do it like his. A little joke that, if I remember correctly, sent one or both of us screaming in actual terror. I remember how he would dress as Santa Claus every Christmas and how we spent hours and hours for months after Christmas trying to pry the truth out of him. He never caved. 30 years have passed, but Mr. Vaden stayed an important and much beloved part of my life. Like so many people, I will miss him dearly. I will remember Mr. Vaden for the joy he always brought with him. I will remember all his jokes, his Donald Duck impression, and his boundless positive energy. I will remember his warm hugs, the sparkle in his eyes, and his rich, deep laugh. I am so grateful to have had him and Val and Eric in our lives. On to Hillary. Hillary is Joanne's youngest daughter. My beloved Mr. Vaden, I have so many memories of my surrogate grandpa. Some of my first memories of life are of Mr. Vaden taking my sister and I down to the garage of the building we all lived in Atlanta to drive our Barbie car around. Mr. Vaden moved into my grandparents' condo so my mom, sister, and me could move into his. I was too young to understand the logistics of this, but looking back, it was just one of the many expressions of love we received from him. When I was a little bit older, we moved to Illinois, and Mr. Vaden would also often visit from Indiana. I remember the two of us talking while we swung in the backyard, and him always telling new jokes. Every time I had a friend over, I would say, "Mr. Vaden, do Donald Duck," and he wouldn't miss a beat. He always made me laugh. We didn't see him quite as often when he moved to California, but he still came to visit when he could. In my late teens and early 20s, I struggled with some difficult and dark challenges. Mr. Vaden was one of the people I could confide in, who understood my struggle in a way only few could. I cherish our talks and will continue to live a life that he can be proud of. On one visit, he was at my house when a young man came to pick me up for our first date. I was running late, so the young man was forced to chit-chat with my mom, grandparents, sister, and Mr. Vaden. I was so happy when, last fall, I ended up marrying that young man, and Mr. Vaden was there to celebrate with us. Words cannot express the gratitude, love, and sorrow I feel. I will remember the love and friendship I was so lucky to have experienced for the rest of my life. Love always, Hillary. All right, and I'm going to wrap with a message from my parents. Sorry. I'm actually going to end on their words, so before I do that, let me just say to all Vadens, how much all the Lynn's love you. Okay. Let me wrap with this. We have lost a dear friend. To say we are friends seems inadequate. We were professional colleagues who developed a strong friendship and then became a family. We did what all families do. We spent holidays together, we traveled together, we attended meetings together, we laughed together, we raised our children together, and then when Eileen died, we lived together. Just a few weeks ago, Dick visited us in Springfield so he could help us while Bob had radiation treatments. He was his usual jovial self, so the news of Dick's rapidly deteriorating health was both surprising and painful. Time and emotions do not permit us to mention the many happy and sad moments we shared. All we know is that we faced them together and they strengthened our bonds. We love Val and Eric as if they were our sons. Our daughters have lost a man who is central to most of their lives. Our granddaughters, Hillary and Jessica, have no memory of life without a man they described as a godfather or third parent, as they attempted to explain to friends the important and loving role he played in their lives. We found a quote that seemed to capture the spirit of the man who is so important to us. So here's the quote. "To laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to leave the world a bit better. To know even one life had breathed easier because you had lived, that is to have succeeded. That is Dick Baden's legacy.
Thank you.